Welcome back to Active Ingredients, the leadership series for people who build, scale, and shape the future of life sciences. I'm your host, Tom Dove, founder and CEO of Fraser Dove International. Today's guest is Laura O'Brien, one of the most accomplished global operations and quality leaders in pharma manufacturing. Laura has led some of the most complex organizations in the industry, from site head roles to VP and SVP at the likes of Sanofi, Novartis, and CSL. She's led thousands of people across single and multi-site networks spanning Europe, the US, APAC, and China. She's delivered performance uplift at scale, navigated divestments, acquisitions, and built cultures that perform in highly regulated, high-pressure environments. But this episode isn't just about scale, it's about what it takes to build and retain world-class teams, how leadership evolves at the top, and what it really means to be the first. Laura, welcome to Active Ingredients.
Thanks, Tom. Great to be here. Looking forward to the session.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. And you and I have spoken many times. You've spoken to lots of different people in my business too. So I'm very excited today to try and get some of the background and the history into what you've done and how you've done it. But I always start these podcasts in the same way. You know, I want to understand, what do you think are the three key ingredients of a successful leader and why?
So the three ingredients for me is being authentic, being bold, and being connected. And so let me just expand a little on that. I mean, I've heard various of your podcasts. Most leaders say authentic leadership is what matters the most. You know, being able to live every day according to your values, your traits, the things that you personally believe in. I mean, these jobs can be tough, and I think you've got to hold true to yourself and your values. Otherwise, people can see that, and you're not true to yourself either. So that's authenticity. I mean, being bold is really about doing things that you did yourself, you didn't think you were able to do. Being bold in your hiring decisions. You know, we're going to talk about teams later on. And, you know, being bold for the organization, right? I never wanted to be somebody that was content with the status quo, always wanted to transform organizations. So being bold in that manner and being bold in some of your decisions as well. And then lastly, you know, being connected, which I think is probably the most important for me. I really believe in building, you know, really strong relationships in the work environment. You know, all the way from interacting with people at the shop floor, in the laboratories, through your direct reports, your peer group. That's really important to me. And I know we're going to talk about that. And then, you know, your boss, the board, right? The outside environment, the regulators that you talked about. So to me, you know, that deep connection is absolutely critical to making everything come together. And I think, you know, I'm able to do all of those three things. I'm at my very best. When I'm not, then I may not be at my best either. So, you know, those are the things that really get me out of bed in the morning, like to see in other leaders.
Yeah, and it's having an awareness of it as well. I think that connected piece is also so important if you've ever played the role of site head.
Yeah.
Because the pressures that you're getting are so wildly different from different stakeholder groups, from, as you say, from the shop floor to the boardroom, and being in the middle of that can be extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And the site head is definitely one of the best roles that you can ever be in, because you have got that whole responsibility, as you say, for the whole site. And everyone there's on the site every day alongside you, but you've also got, you know, the above site challenges, pressure and support as well. And really my first role as site head, I would say, was one of the most important steps I ever took, because that's really led me on my career journey to do bigger things beyond that.
Yeah, I love it. And before we get into the kind of nuts and bolts of how your career developed, if we go back to those early formative years when you were, I don't know, school, college, before you then went onto university and your apprenticeships, did you ever think you were destined for life sciences? Were there any kind of signposts that would point you in this direction?
Well, my parents were both scientists. So, well, my dad was a retired dentist. My mum's a retired biology teacher. So, kind of had science in the blood, so to
Yeah.
speak. My father always wanted me to be a medic, right? He was really pushing me. You should do medicine, Laura. You'd be really good at that. But it just never appealed to me. I love chemistry. And I knew some people that got on to do pharmacy from a high school and talked to some of them. I really liked where they were going in their journey. So that's what took me to do pharmacy. I worked every weekend, every holiday in Boots a Chemist, which is a big retail pharmacy chain for those of
Yeah.
you not in the UK. But then when it came to, choosing my career, I was like, I don't know if I'm quite the person for retail pharmacy. I find it a little bit repetitive. I really want to do something different. I want to do industrial pharmacy. And that's really, what started me on my career. And I did do some locums as a pharmacist when I was doing my PhD in Bradford. So kept my hand in at that point in time. But really beyond that, really moved into, the industrial pharmacy, pharmaceutical industry career.
Like it. Yeah, this is a nice foundation, I think, for the episode, is that there was definitely already an awareness of the industry and then an awareness of which way you wanted to go, because sometimes still now people are falling into the industry or falling into technical operations in different ways, but it seems like yours was a little bit more purposeful, a little bit more deliberate.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to do something different. I was always ambitious and there are not many people who could secure roles in the industry from pharmacy schools. So that's what led me there. I started my career at SmithKline Beecham in Worthing, which I did 20 years later go back and be a site head for. So, that was that path that took me on. I really enjoyed the science and I just enjoyed the interaction with people as well and where each business was headed in that direction.
And what about the leadership traits? Do you feel that they were something that you had in those formative years before getting into the professional life, or was that a skill and a muscle that you had to develop as you started to work?
I think a mix of both, right? I think inherently, I mean, I was always an outgoing person. I used to do amateur dramatics alongside my father. There he comes again. And so, that connectedness with people, being center stage, so to speak, as well. I mean, that was a more natural thing for me. I'm the eldest of four as well. So, looked after my younger brothers and sisters as well. So I think, yeah, there was definitely something there. But, being bold, being able to take leaps of faith into roles that I'd never done before, I think that came later on in my career journey.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I like this though. This all of these puzzle pieces coming together really nicely. So I've got a really good picture of how you've then been able to go and achieve what you've been able to achieve. Shall we talk about those kind of formative years before we get into your first leadership role? Like what drew you into industrial pharmacy and kind of CMC and all of that kind of world? What was the thing that really kind of lit you up?
Yeah, well, I think these are very entry level roles for, pharmacy students or life science students, coming into the industry. You really are coming in to do, early phase development, clinical manufacture. You're kind of not, you're never left unsupervised for long in those entry roles. I really liked, being able to think, well, what's going to happen with this work that I'm doing? Yes, we're doing, formulation development, mix and speed studies, but this is going to be a product. It's going to be an antiviral from my early career, and this is going to go into patients. Kind of having that end goal of the patient in mind was always important to me. So that's what, motivated me in the industry. And then I think what really interested me next was leading people and managing teams, right? That really excited me, really engaged me, and I really liked, my first role. I had one person who reported into me, and it was a student as well, a 1 year placement, and that to me that was the best thing because I learned so much about myself and how I could lead someone and develop them and get them to learn about the industry, get them to learn about themselves. And I was kind of hooked then, leading people became something I was very passionate about.
Yeah. And was that the first time that you actually thought, I am a leader here, even though it was only one person? Is that when you actually saw, I'm going to take a step into that direction?
I'm not sure. I never saw myself. It kind of evolved, I got more and more teams and people. And then I think, when I had a team, maybe about 8, 10 people, I suddenly thought, wow, I'm a leader now and I have got a team. And I've got a big responsibility here to make sure that the whole team deliver what the business needs us to deliver as well. So I think it was, maybe only a couple of years in, but I think when the team got to be a bit more substantial size and people were relying on you, and then of course you had people who led people, which is always, another step in that leadership journey as well. Yeah, I mean, I would say 2 or 3 years into my leadership journey, I felt, I'm a boss now, right?
Yeah, nice, nice. And what about, as we both mentioned earlier, that kind of the catalyst role of being a site head? What about that first time that you had that responsibility? Was that a big game changer for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really special because I was at Holmes Chapel, which is north of England, and I'd been 12 years at that site after my PhD. So I really felt, that's where I'd grown up as a scientist and as a leader as well. So, coming from, I guess, not entry level as PhD, but almost entry level, all the way through to being the site head was, something I was so proud of. Hadn't even hit 40 yet, so that was another big milestone for me. And I was the first female leader, so it was an achievement I was really proud of. And I think, leading your peers in that kind of role was another challenge for me, right? I hadn't led such senior leaders before. And, some of these had been colleagues of mine for a very long time. We'd worked together, and that was a definite change when you go from, being part of a team to managing that team. I think a lot of leaders go through that transition, and it's always one that's not, you don't always get right. First of all, I definitely say I made a few mistakes, with a couple of the leaders. I got some feedback on that as well. And yeah, I had to learn. That's a little bit back ago. I didn't have a coach at that point, but certainly had, I always value the HR head, right? All the roles I've ever done, the relationship with your HR partner is hugely important. And, my HR partner, she'd always say, Laura, I don't think that went great today. Maybe you should think about approaching it another way. And okay, yeah, I'll listen to that. So I think, getting that feedback from people was important as well. But, what an opportunity to lead the whole site. You really are the face of the site. You're the face of the company as well for the business. And I've been really fortunate. I've led 4 different sites in my career. 2 for Sanofi, 1 for GSK, 1 for Novartis that then became CSL. And it's a very special role, but you have to really care about the company, and you have to care about the people as well. So
Yeah,
you,
because
you get to do a real diverse range of activities as well. You know, one day I could have had the government on site. They were auditing us for flu pandemic readiness, actually, in Liverpool, all the way through to, you know, what I call the teen toilets conversations of, you know, we need different lighting in the canteen or something like that. So you do get the whole range being a site head, but that's what makes it a fantastic role.
Yeah, yeah. And we've always known you in our business as a relentless builder, right? You've built your career throughout all of these different steps. You've also built some amazing teams, but you've also been given opportunities, right? You've taken them, you've created them, and then, your mentors have always seen something in you. What do you think it's been that has been the thing that's kicked the door down for you and for you to be able to really flourish?
Yeah, I mean, they probably saw more in me than I could see in myself, for sure. But I guess they spotted that ambition, the commitment I had to, you know, work really hard, do things well, and then also how I interacted with people and how I built relationships. So some of the things we've been talking about, they could probably spot that in me long before I spotted it in myself. And I would say the most important thing, those mentors who evolved into sponsors, really, who gave me those roles, was to put me in roles that were really outside my comfort zone. So the first was when I went to be head of device and equipment technology, which was really looking after inhalation devices. So all the plastic bits and valves and cans. You know, I was used to formulation, mixing, spray drying, all those things. All of a sudden, I've got a different kind of technology, different people. You know, everybody was engineers. They were a lot more introverted in style. So I had to learn to deal with, you know, different people than I'd been used to dealing with. And some of the things that I felt important weren't important to them, and vice versa. So I really was out my depth, so to speak, especially in those early days. But my mentor, you know, he knew I could do it, and he had the faith and belief in me. And, you know, he just had to give me that chance. And that role, I'd say, was pivotal because I really learned to lead outside the areas which I was comfortable with. And then
And
the
it,
other role, I talked about site head at Holmes Chapel, but I was very quickly moved to be the site head for Sanofi and Dagenham down in London. And again, it was sterile technologies, top 5 products for Sanofi, oncology products. So again, I was kind of thrown into this different technology, much more strategically important site for the business. All males on the leadership team at that time as well. So again, I was really kind of, you know, in uncharted territory. But the traits and values and the way I led from prior roles really took me along that path there in Dagenham also.
so when you see, um, not versions of yourself, but when you are playing that role of mentor sponsor, are you then also following a similar track and trying to get people comfortable being uncomfortable and taking on challenges out of their comfort zone?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I've done that several times in my career. I remember one of my direct reports who worked in MS&T, so, you know, the kind of process engineering technology aspects of the business. And I kept thinking, this guy would be excellent in supply chain, right? He really knows the business, he knows the site, he's, you know, very data driven. And I had that discussion with him, and he was like, what? Supply chain? And I was like, yeah. And then I kind of sowed that seed with my boss, and my boss went, that's a really good idea. And, you know, 6 months in, the guy's moved over to supply chain and really excelled in that. In fact, that's where he's continued in his career, and he's quite senior now in supply chain. So yeah, always looking to think, where can someone's, skills take them that may not be where they thought that they were going to go.
Yeah, it's really interesting as well because I think in the way that talent dynamics are in the industry at the moment, there's not enough people for the roles that are going to be available in the organizations. I know AI is going to affect some parts of, tech ops and supply, but not enough, not fast enough where there's still leaders that are needed. I think one of the big retention pieces that people should be thinking about is how to move good talent, as you say, internally into different skill sets so that actually you have a better chance of keeping your best people. So,
Yeah, totally agree.
because I was going to ask, what does it take for you to build and and kind of retain, truly world-class teams? What have you done? What levers have you had to pull?
One of my phrases I always say is surround yourself with the best people. Right. And some people I work for now say that as well, and they use it as their mantra. But, that I'm always looking for the best individual who's right for that point in time, for that role in that organization. So what can the individuals bring? I mean, a lot of people have got the same CVs, we've all grown up and we've done these roles in the industry, but what's unique about that person as a leader? And there's a lot you can do now, and you probably know this, Tom, as well. You've got competency-based interviewing. Also you can do kind of more in-depth psychological analyses of people, particularly as I was hiring senior leaders into key roles. And external talent was, I want to learn more about this person. It's not just enough to have myself and somebody else interview this person. I want to know more. How can we go a layer deeper? Because external hires are so critical, and you can go wrong more often than not with an external hire. So I've used that before. But, beyond the competency framework, what I'm really looking for is this person going to transform the organization in the way it needs to be transformed at this point in time? And that can mean different things on different trajectories for different companies. And will the people in my organization follow this leader? Right? Are they going to get alongside them, respond to them, give them discretionary effort as well, because they want to do it not just for the company, but for the individual as well.
Yeah, I love that because it's quite an interesting dynamic when you are in an interview scenario. Um, you're only really seeing tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And actually, the values, the behaviors, the personality stuff is quite hard to quantify when you have 60-minute, in a room where you've talked about tea, coffee, traffic, and then you have the last 5-minute wash up at the end. It is difficult. And I think that you're absolutely spot on. If you can really try and find out what that uniqueness is, that's the real key to making a good external hire. The other interesting dynamic for you, Laura, was you were often thrown in at the deep end, but you were often the first woman to be thrown in at the deep end in certain roles. Like, how did you navigate that? Because leading as a woman in technical operations, manufacturing has evolved over, the career that you've had, but it must have been very different when you first got into it. What does being that first person teach you, I suppose?
Yeah, I talked already about one site. I was at every site head role. So I was the first female in that role. So, the first thing is there's a lot of eyes on you as well. You're different. You speak in a different way, you dress in a different way, you engage in a different way as well. So you always have to be visible, that you're always on show, and particularly in that environment. Something I loved about being the first female leader in these sites was the way females who were working on the sites responded to you. They were so proud that, there was a female leader at a senior role, particularly in manufacturing, tech ops, that always, as you say, isn't that common. So it was definitely, people felt young females were inspired that this was somewhere they could get to, particularly because I've had 3 kids who are all grown up now along the way. I often get asked, well, how did you manage to do everything, Laura? Right? How did you get your career, your family? And, what I always reply back is, don't feel you have to be this super capable human being, right? I don't believe you can be. You've got so much to juggle: career, family, home, yourself, your own personal hobbies and things as well, that I've always felt you have to trade off at different times. So, as my career was evolving and my kids were growing up, I might not have had the tidiest of house always, or the, the prettiest garden on the street, but that didn't really matter at that point in time, right? I had to trade off and say, this is what's important at this point in time. I worked so hard, lots of hours. If I could tell my younger self, I would say, go home at 5 o'clock. You don't need to have that conversation with Fred or Mary. That's not going to be important in the grand scheme of things. But getting home, being able to pick your kids up out of nursery on time is really important. And, that's what I try to pass on to females in the organization today that are really worried about, how do I balance it all? How do I juggle it? And, I just try to impart, don't try to be perfect. It's just, in my view, it's impossible if you really want to do all of these things really well. So trade off one against the other at different times.
Yeah, I love that. Don't feel like you have to be kind of superhuman all the time, but that
Yeah,
only comes with perspective and experience. And it's good that
exactly.
you are now in that mentoring role where perhaps you didn't have other female mentors that had gone through your path to give that advice to you.
Exactly. I think I only met one tech ops female leader in my journey who was in CSL, who was part of the transition team when CSL acquired Novartis. And, to me, this was wonderful to see a female in a very senior role. I think in quality, it's more common. We certainly came across more senior females in quality who I respected and admired. But in tech ops, manufacturing, very much less so. And engineering as well. We've certainly always looked at the 2 areas where we struggled to have as many females were manufacturing and engineering.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that is something that's still going to be a challenge in the industry unless we can revamp early years and early careers in a different way. But we will see. You mentioned earlier, though, about mentorship and sponsorship. Okay, so when you're taking on these really cool challenges and you're being that first person, what's the difference between, when does it shift from mentorship to sponsorship, and why does that matter in today's world?
So I see mentorship as more, supporting from the side. And, I've mentored many people, both within my function and then outside of my function as well. And particularly when you're mentoring outside your function, you can be, a person who wants to bounce their thoughts about their career, some particular challenges they've got at that moment in time. So those are the kind of mentoring relationships, and maybe a 4, 6, 8 month relationship that you would have to help them again at a specific point in their journey. Mentorship, I do see when it's someday in your own function, you can really look to move them and give them opportunities much more directly than you can, say, outside of your function. But sponsorship is really advocating for that individual within the organization, making sure, when the board comes, I'd really like, Veronica to meet the board, those kind of things. So really sponsoring them, giving them those opportunities. So that's a slight subtle difference. I mean, often they can overlap as well, as I'm sure you know. And I would say, my mentors did evolve into sponsors who really helped me with my career. But I've had great mentoring relationships when it's not necessarily about the roles or where that person is going. It's just helping them, with their leadership journey and the challenges that they have in the organization for that particular project or deliverable. And those relationships can be great as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because I love it, because I think that sometimes people talk about mentors and don't separate the subject of then sponsorship. And sponsorship seems like it's something that happens at a specific time, and it's access and, as you say, advocacy, moving and pushing people into that spotlight. I'm interested now to talk about how your leadership journey evolved, and in fact how you evolved as a leader as you then went through different grades of roles, the different complexity across different locations, different sites, all of this kind of stuff. Like, what did you have to, I suppose, unlearn? What were you like when you were your first site head compared to your first global head?
Yeah, that's always a really interesting transition because, as I said, you're on the site every day. You know everybody, everything, and can be in your control. Of course, we know it's not always, but it can be, and you can do things very quickly. Go down to the shop floor, see where there's a challenge, help the team, and then all of a sudden you're now. And I moved to be head of global quality. That was my first global role, where had the sites, but I'm not on the sites anymore every day. I've got quality systems, I've got R&D quality. So, you know, you have to have different relationships with people. And a lot of them are, as we're doing, Teams, video calls. In my early days, we didn't even use the video as much as we should have. We all went on calls and we all just didn't show our faces. And eventually that changed during COVID. But it's a really big transition because it's much more about influence than being, you're in direct control of that area. So, how you get 4 different sites to want to follow the same standard can be challenging. Every site's got its own legacy, how they've evolved and adapted their systems. And, myself and my team are saying, well, we really want to have, one quality management system across all of our sites. And yeah, sometimes they just say, no, we're not going to do that. We don't like it. So it's really, about selling the benefits to people,
Yeah.
why it's important for the business and not just for that individual site to be following a standard. And I think when you get a few advocates again, things can happen quickly. Connecting people across the sites is really important. People who are in similar roles. I was really passionate about creating what we called network value stream leads when I was in manufacturing. So there were 4 heads of fractionations, but there was one head who took some more accountability for the network. So problems that had to be solved and lessons to be shared to happen across the network, they would take on that responsibility. So connecting people across the networks exceptionally important. Of course, your site heads and having them aligned as a unit is exceptionally important. I'm a huge advocate. I don't know if you know of the number one team concept that Patrick Lencioni from his 5 Dysfunctions as a Team talks about. But the model really is that your number one team shouldn't be the team that you lead, but the team that you're part of. So for the site heads, their number one team really is that team of site heads. For me, as their manager, my number one team is the global operations team. So my partners in quality, supply chain, engineering, EHS. And, if you can have cohesion there across the groups that then oversee the sites, you're all of a sudden creating this kind of global transformation and change. But again, it's not easy. We all as site heads, we all like to be, kings or queens of our domains, and then to become part of that network where you play for the network. You don't just play for the site. And really beyond that, I really had what I call the extended leadership group. So it was not just the site heads, but their direct reports. And we'd only meet once a quarter, but just to get that consistency of messaging, the consistency of approach that everyone understood. And then, they would work together outside on activities to move the business forward as well as their day job, of course. But getting that next layer, if you can it's relatively easy to get the site heads on board, I would say, right? Then we're senior, but getting the next level of leaders all together to play for that network, I think can be immensely powerful, because all of a sudden, the messages, the direction, the consistencies going into the organizations at a deeper level.
Yeah, love that. And what about because it seems as though as you departed I don't want to say controlling role of site head, but where it's all within your sphere of influence, you then go up into global roles. Do you feel that you have to work on a bit more self-awareness as well at that moment, and a bit more like reflecting and, looking at yourself as a leader and how you then engage with different people?
Yeah, absolutely. All of a sudden I was engaging with peers who I hadn't worked with before. It was a different part of the business. In subject areas I wasn't as familiar with. So, developing those relationships, and I have quite a direct, forward, transparent style. That doesn't always work with everybody, particularly as you get more senior in the organization. There's more people you have to influence. They may have alignment with somebody else in their business, and I definitely had to invest in those, peer relationships for sure, and understand what's important to those leaders versus what was important to me, and how could we come to a win-win going forward. And again, that was really important for the people who reported into us, because they're looking up to us to see, well, how are these two individuals working together, how are they behaving together. And when you're really cohesive, it's immensely powerful. But if there's friction there, that does not bode well further down the organization either. So that I had to learn different ways to approach relationships for sure. I had to really think about, how do I think as a more strategic executive leader? What should I be doing now in a global role versus what I'm doing as a site head? I don't want to be a super site head, looking after 5 sites. I want to really be doing the things that I need to. So where do I need to create capability in the organization for the future? What is it that we need to think about for the next 5 years? How skills need to evolve? And yeah, we all get caught into, there's a challenge in this site. Like, we all need to meet with this site tomorrow immediately, but that's the site head's job. and the site leadership team's role is not really my role. So it was really about thinking about that kind of, future strategic, how I spend my time as well. And as a leader, perhaps of moving away from that direct style, asking more questions of people, not necessarily always going with what I first thought of as well. So I would say my styles evolved. You talked about from grit to grace. I don't know if I would quite say I'm graceful, but I was very fortunate. I had a executive coach when I was in both global roles, actually the same coach. She spent a lot of time with me. She got feedback, 360 feedback from people who worked for me, my boss, and those skills, those more executive leadership skills is where she worked with me. This is how I wanted to be. I, practice it in real-time situations. One of my team, actually, I said, I really want to ask more questions. I don't want to make conclusions so quickly. And we were in a big one-day meeting, and I asked my direct report, who had a very good relationship with, can you observe me in this meeting and give me feedback? Right, I'm asking enough questions, or coming to conclusions too quickly. And that was really good because, it was someone who could see me live in the room rather than my coach, who was obviously offline. And to get that kind of instantaneous feedback was really great.
Do you know what? I'm going to steal that as well. I like that. I really do like that because I find myself sometimes in meetings, my inner dialogue is saying, are you asking enough questions? And then afterwards I try and then rewind it and think, did I do enough of it? But just picking somebody else that's in the room that then can be very honest with
Yeah,
their appraisal of it. It's a great idea.
yeah. And it's simple, and, it kind of, it softens that it makes that relationship stronger as well, right? Because you're showing you trust them, they trust you to give you the feedback. And I've had a lot of different feedbacks across my career, but particularly when it's somebody you have a strong trust and deep relationship with, that can be so powerful.
Yeah, and it also seems as though that the coaching investment that you've made in yourself as a leader has also been very powerful for your evolution as a leader, and then being able to coach better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's things I learned from my coach that that again then I play back to people in my team as well. But I was really fortunate. The company wanted to invest in me. Certainly, some of the site heads that were in my team, invested in executive coaching for them, and it could be for a specific area. Like I say, there's technical areas sometimes, as you become a site head, you've got much more financial responsibility. So, how do you learn about finance that works for the business, rather than, the technicalities, but what's important to the business? How does yield impact cost of goods, etc.? And then, of course, the soft skills, somebody wants to work on their relationships, or wants to be more hold people to account more, and it was great for me to be able to give that back to and just say, okay, we're going to arrange for you to have an executive coach. I had such a great experience with mine. I'm sure you will too.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems as though that's given you like a really good ability to then go and help build better teams. We've always known you as someone that has developed great leaders within your organizations. Whenever we've headhunted people from your teams or things like that, we've always known that they've been extremely well developed. How have you started to build that culture? Like, how do you build trust, standards, belief, whatever it might be, in these global teams?
I mean, one of the things you have to do is walk the talk, right? I say that's really important. Role model what you want to see happen. Go, I wanted leaders to be on the shop floor. more, and it was part of our standard work. Well, when I go to sites, what's my standard work, right? Do I go out on the floor more? What do my peers do as well? So, role modeling, the changes that you want to see, the behaviors that you want to see as well, I think is exceptionally important. Again, you're in a very senior role. A lot of eyes are on you. So you have to role model, but you have to be authentic with that as well, going back to our first conversation. So, if you can do role model in a very authentic way, engage with people, I think that's hugely important, because people will not align behind you if they don't see that you believe in it and you're engaged in that as well. So I think the role modeling is exceptionally important. Again, being lined up with your peer group, because, if I want to do something in manufacturing, but quality want to go in a different direction, or process engineering, again, all eyes are on you as a leadership team. So being truly cohesive and aligned at the number one team level is very important as well. And people, they see what you do, how you behave, and they'll copy that. It's natural, and it's absolutely wonderful when you hear people playing back the things that you say. One of the value stream leads in manufacturing, I remember saying, "Well, Laura, we got to do this for the network now, not just for the site." And to me, that was fantastic, because that's what I'd been wanting people to say for a year, and then somebody was playing it back to me. And so being consistent as well, I believe, is really important. But developing people, as we've talked about earlier, finding great talents, giving them opportunities, moving them around the business as well, right, and giving them different experiences, it means you're starting to create that single culture within the business as well.
And what about because the dynamics of roles in quality and tech ops, you need to hold people to account, but how do you do that without losing them, without too much pressure, without, breaking trust or psychological safety? What's the magic formula for you there?
Yeah, and all sites go through tough times for sure. You have a run of challenges on a sterile filling line, or something in fractionation can happen in plasma, and you have to, because you realize, as a senior leader, this is really important to the business, right? Because what we make every day becomes product that goes for sales, and that can affect the financial outcome for the company. So you're much closer to the actual sales and cost of goods. And often I'll be getting challenges into myself as well. Somehow you have to instill an urgency, but in a way that it's supportive as well. And I would, sometimes sites would say to me, "Well, we've had this challenge, we need 15 days downtime so we can get the line back up and running." And I'm kind of like, I don't think that's going to work for the business, but why is that? What can you do? Have you talked to this other site? They've done this before. So trying to help them learn. And then there becomes a point where that you can't push further, because to push further would be the wrong thing for the business. So I think with experience, I've learned that line. I would also call the site heads up and say, what's your view? I would check it with some of my peers as well in quality. And, when you can get to that point, and I keep using this word cohesion, when you're all together and aligned in that view, you say, right, this is the path we're taking forward. and this is where we're going to go, and we all believe in it. There's no naysayers. And sometimes, again, there's risk there. Good quality people, good manufacturing people, we're all using, good risk management in these decisions that we're taking as well.
Yeah, I think this is an absolute 101 in how to do, how to do this, how to build, as you say, trust, standards, belief. It's been something that has gone all the way through your career, and I think that those first three answers that you gave about being authentic, bold, and connected, it's rung true throughout all of those different roles. The great thing is how eloquently you can talk about how you've evolved in those moments too. So the first version of your leadership that was still authentic, bold, and connected, maybe is slightly different to where you are now in that kind of more self-aware coach, sponsor, mentor type version. So yeah, absolute kudos, Laura. I've really enjoyed this. What I'd like to do now, though, is talk about the future of life sciences. Like, what excites you at the moment? What about global manufacturing? What are you thinking is on the horizon that's pretty cool?
Yeah, I mean, before I talk about manufacturing, I would come back to patients, right? What's really exciting for patients now as we move into the future? And of course, there's all new therapies coming online. You can see the big acquisitions, big pharma are buying smaller firms for vast monies to be able to get access to treatments for unmet medical needs, which I think is wonderful. I think, even if you look at some, like long-standing diseases or conditions like psoriasis, that affects a lot of people, there's now biologicals that are completely life-changing for, people with psoriasis as well. So I think how medicines are evolving is, wonderful for patients. And we always have to come back to that, right? We're here for the patients, and we can easily forget that with everything else we have to deal with every day. So that's first and foremost. I think, you mentioned it earlier, artificial intelligence, right? Where is that taking us? And I actually just started doing a online course with MIT on AI implications for business strategy, because I really wanted to think, not the technicalities of AI, but, how can we apply that in our industries? So I think of, what, how pharma companies are using AI now in deviation management. You've got access to all this data. You can pull all this data immediately that can tell you, well, this is going to be the best way to solve this problem. And this is the best way is going to be to fix this problem so it never happens again. And that would have taken our teams weeks to do, to get all the data together, read all the reports, right? They can have that almost instantaneous now as well. So just from, resolving problems, improving right first time, that's really going to help. And then, we'll have people who, you can write reports, you can put in some keywords, you can write reports for a quality audit again, in, minutes rather than the hours that it used to have taken. So people can focus on more important topics and writing up the reports and, checking everything. One of the really interesting quotes I learned in this course was when somebody said, AI is not going to replace jobs of people, but it may replace the jobs of people who don't know about AI, which I thought, yeah, I like that. And that actually makes a lot of sense. And, and that's why I'm trying personally to learn a little bit more about it at the moment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely spot on. If you can understand it and lean into it right now, I think that they're going to be the kind of leaders that win. There's still quite a few that it doesn't concern me at this moment, but I was speaking to somebody only earlier today about an executive MBA that they're doing, where one of the lightning parts of that has been this function that they've been talking about on AI. So it's like it is going to be very interesting and exciting. But what about taking our minds to the future of like leadership? How do you think leadership is going to evolve and change in the not too distant future?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about AI, you know, given people are not going to be doing some of those, more manual tasks, it's really about, well, what skills are people going to need? How do you as leaders ensure that they've got those skills? What roles is it they're going to be doing? Where do you need them to be? Really trying to anticipate that workforce for the future is going to be really important. But I would still come back to, be authentic, be bold, be connected. As I read about AI and learn about AI can do things, but when AI interacts with people, it can do much, much more. Right? So, be connected to your organization, be connected to your colleagues, be connected to AI as well. And, I'm sure the leaders of tomorrow, if they can do those things, they're going to have great progression as well.
Fantastic. Well, Laura, I've absolutely loved this episode. There has been so many good takeaways. I've really enjoyed it. I knew it was going to be good as well when we first spoke. And then I know it's taken us some time to get here, but it has been absolutely brilliant. Easy as ABC, authentic, bold, and connected.
There we go. And I didn't even realize that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. I hope everybody's enjoyed this episode.